"Sir, leave the country immediately," said the new waitress to the billionaire seconds before the $74 million deal. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany table where James Mitchell sat alone, his weathered hands tracing the rim of his coffee cup. At 62, the tech billionaire had built an empire worth billions, yet tonight something felt different. The exclusive restaurant hummed with quiet conversations and clinking silverware, but his attention fixed on the young woman approaching his table. She couldn't have been more than 25, her uniform crisp and her dark eyes holding an intensity that made him pause mid-sip. "Sir," she whispered urgently, glancing over her shoulder before leaning closer. "You need to leave the country immediately." Her voice trembled, but her gaze never wavered. "Please trust me. You have maybe an hour, 2 at most." James set down his cup, studying her face. In 40 years of business, he'd learned to read people. This wasn't a joke or some elaborate prank. The fear in her eyes was real. 3 hours earlier, James had been reviewing contracts for the biggest acquisition of his career, a $74 million deal that would cement his company's position in renewable energy. The negotiations had taken months, and tomorrow's signing ceremony would mark the culmination of everything he'd worked toward since losing his wife 5 years ago. This deal wasn't just about money. It was about building something meaningful, something Catherine would have been proud of. The restaurant Le Bernardin had been their special place. Every anniversary, every celebration, they'd shared quiet dinners here. Tonight he'd come alone to honor her memory before tomorrow's milestone. The maître had seated him at their usual table by the window, where city lights twinkled like stars Catherine used to point out during their evening walks. The new waitress, who'd introduced herself simply as Lily, had seemed nervous during her first approach. Her hands shook slightly as she poured his water, and she'd apologized twice for minor delays. James had been patient, remembering his own early days climbing the corporate ladder. Everyone deserved kindness, especially those just starting out. But now, staring into her frightened eyes, he realized her nervousness hadn't been about the job. "What are you talking about?" he asked quietly, keeping his voice calm despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. "Why would I need to leave?" Lily glanced toward the kitchen, then back to him. "My brother works for a private security firm. They were hired to watch you. There's going to be an incident tonight. They think you're connected to something you're not, but they won't listen to reason." "Connected to what?" James leaned forward, his businessman's instincts taking over. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because my grandmother always said, good people don't deserve to suffer for other people's mistakes." Tears welled in her eyes. "Your wife used to volunteer at the children's hospital where my little sister was treated. She paid for surgeries that insurance wouldn't cover. She never asked for recognition, never wanted thanks." The words hit James like a physical blow. Catherine had indeed volunteered there, spending countless hours reading to sick children and quietly helping families who couldn't afford treatment. "How could you possibly know that?" he whispered. Lily pulled out her phone, showing him a faded photo of a young girl in a hospital bed smiling despite the tubes and wires surrounding her. Beside the bed sat Catherine, reading from a worn copy of Charlotte's Web, her gentle smile as radiant as James remembered. "That's my sister, Sophie. She was 8 when she got leukemia. The doctor said experimental treatment was her only chance, but it cost more than my family made in 5 years." Lily's voice broke slightly. "Your wife didn't just pay for the treatment. She visited Sophie every week for 2 years, bringing books and hope when we had none left." James's throat tightened. Catherine had never mentioned specific children by name, saying it wasn't about recognition but about love. She'd come home from the hospital glowing with stories about brave little souls who taught her more about courage than any boardroom ever could. "Sophie's 21 now," Lily continued, wiping her eyes. "She's studying to be a pediatric nurse because your wife showed her that helping others is the greatest gift you can give. When I saw your name on tonight's reservation list, I knew I had to warn you." "Warn me about what exactly?" James asked, though he was beginning to piece together fragments of a larger picture. His company's latest contract involved a defense subsidiary, and he'd heard whispers about industrial espionage in their sector. "There's a federal task force that believes you're selling technology secrets to foreign competitors. They don't have evidence, but they're planning to arrest you tonight as you leave the restaurant. It's supposed to look like a random stop, but they'll find planted evidence in your car." The magnitude of what she was saying struck him like lightning. "But the signing tomorrow?" "That's exactly why they're doing it tonight. Someone wants that deal to fail, and they're willing to destroy your reputation to make it happen." Lily's hands trembled as she spoke. My brother overheard the real plan. They're not after justice. They're after your company. James felt his world tilting. 40 years of building his reputation, of honoring Catherine's memory through ethical business practices, could be destroyed by dawn. A commotion near the kitchen entrance caught his attention. 2 men in dark suits had entered, scanning the dining room with practiced eyes. They're here, Lily whispered, her face draining of color. The back exit leads to an alley, but they'll have that covered too. She glanced around desperately. There's a service elevator to the roof, but you'd need staff access. James's mind raced. Everything he'd built, every dream he'd shared with Catherine, hung in the balance. But as he looked at this young woman risking everything to help him, he remembered Catherine's words from their last conversation before her illness took her. James, money and success mean nothing if we don't use them to lift others up. Why are you doing this? He asked. You could lose your job. Maybe face charges for helping me. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Because your wife taught my family that love isn't just a feeling. It's action. She didn't have to help Sophie, but she chose to. She didn't have to spend her evenings reading to scared children, but she chose to. Her voice grew stronger. She changed our lives forever. And I won't let corrupt people destroy the legacy of someone who saved my sister. The weight of Catherine's unseen impact hit James like a tidal wave. All those evenings she'd come home late, claiming hospital traffic. She'd been creating ripples of kindness that were still spreading years after her death. There might be another way, he said slowly. I need to make a call. Sir, we don't have time. Trust me. James pulled out his phone, dialing a number he'd memorized but hoped never to use. Senator Reynolds, it's James Mitchell. I need to cash in that favor you owe me. Yes, tonight, because someone's trying to frame me and I have evidence of who's really behind the defense contract leaks. He'd suspected for weeks that his main competitor had been feeding information to foreign buyers while positioning James as the scapegoat. Now with his back against the wall, he was ready to reveal what he knew. I need protective custody for a witness. James continued into the phone, looking at Lily. And I need it now. The 2 men in suits were moving closer, weaving between tables with casual determination. Lily grabbed his arm. The roof, she whispered urgently. Whatever you're planning, we need to move now. James followed Lily through the kitchen, past startled cooks and dishwashers, toward a narrow service door marked authorized personnel only. His phone buzzed with an immediate call back from Senator Reynolds, who'd apparently taken his request seriously. Federal agents are en route to your location. The senator's voice crackled through the speaker. They'll identify themselves with the code word Charlotte, like your wife's favorite book. Stay on the line. As they climbed the service stairs 2 at a time, James realized the irony wasn't lost on him. Charlotte's Web, the same book Catherine had been reading to Sophie in that hospital photo, was now part of his salvation. The rooftop door burst open, revealing the glittering city skyline and the sound of approaching helicopters. But these weren't the enemy. 3 federal agents in FBI windbreakers were already waiting, having repelled from their own aircraft. Mr. Mitchell, Agent Sarah Kowalski, FBI, code word Charlotte. She extended her hand while her team secured the area. Senator Reynolds briefed us. You mentioned evidence of the real perpetrators. James pulled out a flash drive he'd been carrying containing months of suspicious communications he'd intercepted from his competitors' servers. Everything's here. Electronic fund transfers, communication logs, shipping manifests that don't match declared cargo. And the young lady. Agent Kowalski gestured toward Lily, who stood wide-eyed at the dramatic turn of events. She's the witness who warned me. Her brother works for the private security firm hired to frame me. James placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. Without her courage, you'd be investigating my wrongful arrest instead of catching the real criminals. Within minutes, the FBI had coordinated with local police to arrest the 2 men downstairs, while a separate team moved on James's competitors' offices with search warrants. The elaborate frame-up, designed to force James to miss tomorrow's signing and allow the defense contracts to fall into the wrong hands, unraveled completely. As dawn approached, James found himself in a federal building, giving his statement while lawyers rushed to ensure tomorrow's deal could proceed as planned. The $74 million acquisition would happen, but more importantly, national security threats had been neutralized. But the real victory wasn't in the boardroom. It was in the quiet courage of a waitress who'd honored the memory of a woman she'd never forgotten. 6 months later, James stood in the children's wing of the same hospital where Catherine had volunteered, watching Lily read Charlotte's Web to a room full of young patients. She'd used the reward money from the FBI case to finish nursing school, following the path Sophie had started because of Catherine's influence. "Some pig," Lily read in the voice Catherine might have used, bringing Wilbur to life for children facing their own battles. James smiled, remembering how his wife's voice could make any story feel magical. Sophie, now a registered nurse herself, worked just down the hall in pediatric oncology. The ripple effects of Catherine's kindness had created an entire generation of healers, inspired by love they'd received in their darkest moments. The $74 million deal had closed successfully, and James's company was now the nation's leading provider of clean energy technology. But the real treasure wasn't in his bank account. It was in understanding how Catherine's legacy lived on through every life she touched. "Mr. Mitchell," a small voice interrupted his thoughts. A boy, maybe 7 years old, tugged on his jacket. "Are you the man whose wife used to read to the sick kids?" "Yes." James knelt down to the boy's level. "Did you know her?" "My big sister did. She told me, 'Your wife said that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you're scared.'" The boy's eyes were serious beyond his years. "I'm getting surgery tomorrow and I'm trying to be brave like she taught my sister." James felt his throat tighten. "What's your name, son?" "Daniel. My sister says your wife would have liked me because I love stories about talking animals." "She absolutely would have," James said, pulling out a brand new copy of Charlotte's Web from his jacket. He carried them now just as Catherine once had. "This is for you, Daniel, and I'll be here when you wake up from surgery, ready to hear what you think of Wilbur and Charlotte." As he left the hospital that evening, James realized that true wealth wasn't measured in billions or business deals. It was measured in the love we leave behind, the courage we inspire in others, and the quiet acts of kindness that ripple forward long after we're gone. Catherine had built an empire of compassion that would outlast any technology company, and now James was finally learning to be worthy of the legacy she'd entrusted to him.